All right, greetings to everybody. Apparently, we're having technical difficulty because Charles is saying that he has a storm going on in his area and he can't get his Wi-Fi to work. I'm going to request, look, I said this last week, I don't like talking to a blank screen, so I would like for you to turn your video cameras to the on position. On the bottom left of your screen, it says start or stop video. You need to push start video. And unless there's a lot of noise in the background, push unmute, please.
My camera won't work, right?
All right, that's fine.
I'm pressing. This is Carrie. I'm pressing start video, and it says my camera.
Okay. So hi, Elijah. I see you now. Thank you. I see you're in a car. Good job. All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Hey, Debbie, good to see you. I saw you on and then you disconnected and now you're back again.
Yeah, I called Miss Dixon and to remind her of the call, and then I got back on.
All right, terrific. So what I was interested.
Everybody's on the call now. Try again. Okay, so I think so. Yeah, I'm actually Robert Chassner.
Yeah, would you, Charles, if you would push your mute button on your phone so I won't get interrupted again, unless you need to talk. All right, so there's many things to go over, but what I'd like to do, Debbie, did you get my email this morning?
Yes, it's exciting.
Well, I wanted to review that briefly before we get into some other things and answer questions. I know there's a lot of chatter going on in the communities that we all live about the up and coming proposed requirement for each of us to be injected with a serum for the COVID virus. And there's a lot of other chatter going on and has been going on for a long time regarding having a chip placed in under your skin so that you can be tracked by the federal authorities and that all of your money can be tracked. Of course, this currency situation, I don't want to get too far involved in that, but it appears like they want to go fully digital so that every transaction can be tracked. But I don't want to really talk about that right now. What I want to talk about is why is it that all of you are spending time and spending money with me and Charles and Debbie to train you to reclaim your private citizenship that was taken from you the day your birth certificate was filed into the public record, or if you immigrated, the date that your immigration bond was filed into the public record and you became a public citizen. And why are you paying all of this money and spending all of this time to claim or reclaim your private citizenship status? And I'm going to give you two very fine examples of why right now. And that has to do with the injection that they're attempting to force upon us for a COVID inoculation or immunization. That might be a better word. Or fraud might even be a better word, where and this other thing having to do with Bill Gates getting a patent to put a chip underneath all of our skin so that we can be traced and tracked on every move that we make. And I want to clearly define for you that if those proposed programs are enacted into law, please listen carefully. That law is for public citizens. In fact, there are millions of laws and statutes and ordinances and rules and regulations that are in existence that were made by man. And I want to emphasize they were not made by God, but they were made by man. And those man-made laws, rules, regulations, statutes, ordinances, and so forth, all of those were made to enforce upon a public citizen. Now, a public citizen is a corporate fiction. A public citizen is not a living being, but because people who are around you and because of who you used to be, your behavior and your indoctrination married together your living body with that corporate fictitious name known as your all capital letter name. And so therefore, your behavior, your speech, your indoctrination, your thoughts, all of that stuff made you liable for all of those millions of laws and statutes and ordinances. You volunteered to become surety. The same thing with the Internal Revenue. You volunteered to be liable for any of the fraud they perpetrate against you. And so when you came to us and asked for education and document resources to reclaim your private status that you were given as a God-given gift at birth, and your moms, unbeknown to them, contracted for you as a minor to become a public citizen through the filing of your birth certificate, all of that was taken away from you. Because you just go back 2 generations and you'll find that every birth was recorded not in the public record, but in the family Bible. And every marriage was not recorded in the public record of the county where you filed for a license, a marriage license, but it was recorded in your family Bible. And the agencies saw it fit to require a license to tax you once again. And because of your lack of knowledge, that was just another way that they could steal, pilfer, and destroy your personal assets and your estate by making you liable for anything which they so chose. And so you take the private citizenship documents that need to be finished, okay? It doesn't take more than 5 or 6 hours of real focus. You can get all of those completed. I know because I've done it. And what you need to do is you need to get them finished, executed, and filed into the public record to reclaim your status. And then as we have our weekly meetings, you need to learn how to behave, how to speak, and how to act that is congruent or matching to your paperwork. So when something ridiculous is forced upon the public citizenship, you are not fooled that you have to accept that. And I want you to just say it to yourself. You don't have to say it to me. You're a private citizen. I do not consent. You have the right and the privilege not to consent to anything that is forced upon the trust known as your all capital letter name. And before you get all of this paperwork done, the presumption is that you and your trust are one and the same, and they're able to enforce or to force upon you or to perpetrate fraud on you anything that they wish. But as a private citizen, they no longer control. There's no more presumption. There's no more implied contracts, but rather you have expressed them in writing. That's why you need to get your paperwork done. Express it in writing, file it in the public record. And when they attempt to perpetrate something against you, you need to say, I do not consent. And anybody that's making you an offer, you now have the right to demand that any offer that they bring to you, it must be signed by a real party in an affidavit format, swearing under penalty of perjury, which means that they're going to have to put up their children's education fund for what they're about to offer you, and they'll never do it. They'll leave you alone because they know they're perpetrating fraud, and they know if they know that you're a private citizen, they're going to leave you alone. I've got case after case after case all around the country where we have expressed the private citizenship in court cases or to the IRS or to a mortgage company or whatever. Obligations are obligations. It's all about money. And when we let them know that we are private citizens and they're about to commit fraud against us and they are about to create a financial injury against us, a private citizen, they will leave you alone. And so if someone comes to me and wants to stick a needle in my arm under the guise that I'm required by law, well, no, I'm not. My paperwork says that I am a living being. I am separate and distinct from the trust known as my all capital letter name. And guess what? I'm the sole beneficiary and the only party who is authorized to say what happens to my trust. And if you want to stick a needle in the arm of my trust, I'm going to demand that you give me a letter of delegation of authority that says that you're able to do so with my consent. Now, I haven't offered that to you, so I know it doesn't exist. So read Exhibit 13. If you perpetrate this against me without my consent, $5 million per. Okay, it's filed in the public record. Mine is, I don't think yours is yet, but you need to file it in the public record. $5 million. That's why they carry bonds. That's why they carry insurance policies. Because if they violate that trust, they're going to pay. And their insurance or their bond will have to be the surety for it because they certainly don't have the money to pay you. Now, if you want to take control of your life and you want to be the sole beneficiary of the trust, and you want to be able to stand up to a federal agency and demand that they prove their claim by swearing under penalty of perjury, and they will back down. If you want that kind of power, you need to finish your paperwork. And you need to continue to make these phone calls to us so that we can give you life practical experiences on how to interact with the public, going in and out, navigating in and out of commerce without you being injured or harmed by all of that fraud that's being perpetrated through the millions of laws, statutes, and so forth. And if somebody passes a law that says to put a chip under my skin, I do not consent. And unless somebody can produce a letter of delegation of authority that says they can enforce such a law against my trust, where I am the sole beneficiary and the only one authorized to say what happens to my trust, and they won't be able to produce that evidence, they have to leave me alone. Otherwise, they are going to be liable for $5 million per incident. And they will have to pay. Now, I know you didn't come on this call to be reprimanded, but I just hope that you hear the passion behind my voice and my message, how important it is You're spending money and you're spending time. You need to get your work done so that you can then take advantage of what it is that we're teaching you. You know, the Bible clearly says, my people perish for the lack of knowledge. All right. And the Bible also talks about being a witness. That's an action word. It's who you are. It's what you be when you are interacting into the public. And so it requires action. It's not something, I mean, there are very smart people with PhDs that are living under a bridge in a tent. And so the knowledge, gaining the knowledge is important, but you have to put it into action. And these calls are to give you practical applications so that you can gain wisdom and discernment when to use this education and when not to use it. Sometimes the principle of being right is not always the right way to go. Sometimes the right way to go is just to settle the matter and move on, because, you know, one of our administrative procedures, you know, could take you 20 hours of paperwork to do between the time you start and the time you finish, let's say, defending your paperwork in a court. And if you're doing it over a $300 electric bill, that doesn't make sense to me. Okay, my time is worth a lot more. 20 hours of time is worth a lot more than a $300 electric. But nevertheless, I think the real point of what I'm sharing with you here is that you've got people in your life. I mean, we got 5 people plus me, 6 people with Charles. He's listening on my cell phone on speaker. And the average person has 200 to 300 people that they know that are in their little circle of influence. So you got 12 to 1,800 people that we can have influence with to put out the doubt, the fear, and the resignation that they are all carrying with them through their indoctrination because of their lack of education, to show them they can take back their power and they can come and join the forces that we're doing here and hire us to learn this education so that they can take back control and power, so that they are not going to be a sheep, a lamb led to the slaughter. Because if you allow yourself to be injected every time you know, some politician wants to gain power by passing such a law, or if you want to be subject to having a computer chip put in you and to become, you know, just another cow in the pasture there or in the barn, and be totally controlled in your life, well then, you know, set aside the education and go ahead and lose your power, lose your control. That's the majority of the people in our culture. But they live in fear. And the majority of our culture lives in fear. So we need to help them, lead them and guide them, and give them an opportunity at least to say yes and no, yes or no, about receiving our education so they can take back control of their own life. You do not have to wait till you get to that resurrected body in the kingdom of heaven on earth in order to receive the riches of the kingdom. The riches of the kingdom are in your paperwork. You can have it today. So if you don't want that computer chip forced upon you, and if you don't want that injection forced upon you, and if you don't want the millions of laws, statutes, and ordinances forced upon you, and along with all of the privileges of learning this comes the responsibility of acting and behaving appropriately. So you can't take advantage of your knowledge and your wisdom that we're teaching you. You have to act responsible. And you'll live a wonderful life, a fulfilled life. It's, you know, we talk in the Old Testament about the word shalom. Shalom. Some people think it just means hello, goodbye, and peace. But what does peace mean? According to biblical principles, it's fulfillment, it's wholeness, it's contentment. Now, do you have fulfillment in your life? Do you have wholeness in your life? Do you have contentment in your life? Well, the only way to get that is having the Holy Spirit alive and well in you. And you take an education like this, and you can receive the riches of the kingdom now, and then use it responsibly. So God's law clearly states, do not injure another party, nor do you injure another party's property. Otherwise, there are consequences. So how is it that someone can put a computer chip under your skin? Or how is it someone can force an injection in your body? That's not God's law. We stand for God's law. You need to get your paperwork done, and you can enforce God's law upon your life. All right? So I don't think I have much more to say about that, other than if you have a question, I'd be happy to answer it, and then we'll move on to something different. If you're going to ask a question, please unmute if you're going to ask a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is very helpful and very practical. I really understood it. I just want to ask the question, in seeking the riches of the kingdom and not being a public citizen, or in becoming a private citizen, what are the things that we would have to forfeit, or is there anything we forfeit to become a private citizen? And what you refer to appropriate behaviors, what are all the appropriate behaviors that we need to just start, specific things you're referring to?
All right. You forfeit nothing, because you're giving up nothing except enslavement. Everything currently which is in your all capital letter name, like your Social Security, like your driver's license, like your bank accounts, your credit cards, court case, anything, all of those things in your all capital letter name, you're not forfeiting them, but rather you're changing the way in which you relate to them. As a public citizen, you are the liable party, and the issuing agency is implying that they're the beneficiary or the top position. They're the ones that get to make the rules. That is what a public citizen, how a public citizen relates to anything in the all capital letter name. As a private citizen, it's no longer an implied agreement, but rather it's an expressed agreement where you get all your paperwork in order. Now you become the beneficiary or the top position or the boss of that particular account or that trust. You become the one who dictates what gets to happen with the assets of that trust. And so what's the difference then? Public citizen is the liable party, the slave, the one enslaved, the one who gets to be bossed around, the one who they get to inject and put the computer chip in. The private citizen is the boss and demands to see their letter of delegation of authority to impose such fraud upon your trust. And when they cannot prove it, then you are protecting and defending yourself as a living being, and you're protecting and defending your trust. So it's all in which the way you relate to that particular item, such as your social security account or your driver's license or anything else that is attached to your all capital letter name in commerce. Your other question is has to do with behavior as a private citizen. I'll give you an extreme example just to make a point so we can move on. I've been doing this a long time. That's why my hair is all white, okay? When you recognize the power behind the education and the power behind the documentation that I share with my clients, when you recognize that commerce was designed directly from the Bible, and when you recognize that sin and debt have similar references in Scripture, and you recognize that Jesus paid the price for all sin of the world, past, present, and future, all inclusive. So, which means that you have an unlimited forgiveness or propitiation of sin, because when he paid the price 2,000 years ago, you weren't even born yet. And all the sin which all of us combined have violated, it's already been forgiven in advance. It's a propitiation, a prepayment of sin. And because commerce is designed out of the Bible, we have a propitiation of debt, which means that we have an unlimited account to access to pay. Let me rephrase that. We have an unlimited account to settle offers of obligation, to discharge debt. See, same reference biblically. And so to answer your question about behavior, I've had clients over the years that were very greedy people. Well, let me rephrase that. I have former clients who were very greedy people, and when I recognized their greed, I fired them because I gave them an opportunity to step aside from greed, to pull greed out of the equation. And every time I spoke to them, they wanted to know how to buy a Rolls Royce, or they wanted to know how to buy a mansion, they wanted to know how to buy a yacht using these principles of the prepaid account. And when they asked me, can you show me? I said, yes, I can, but I choose not to, because there's no wisdom being demonstrated in your life. There's no discernment. All there is greed, and I'm not going to teach anybody to use these principles when greed is involved, because all that will do is lead you to the path of getting into trouble. And even though what we do is completely lawful, I shouldn't even say completely, it's either lawful or it's not lawful. These are lawful exercises. And even though they're lawful, if you demonstrate greed, the agencies are going to give you a lot of attention, and they're going to put you in harm's way. And I refuse to be a party to leading you down the path of getting you into trouble. And even though you will ultimately be exonerated, it's not worth the headache of having to go through something to prove it by bringing attention to yourself by doing those types of greedy transactions.
Thank you.
Not to mention it's not biblical, all right?
Yeah.
So to answer your question in summary, you need to learn how to behave where you're doing things appropriately and not bringing attention to yourself. And as I mentioned, sometimes you're better off not using these remedies in certain situations, and sometimes you're better off using them. And the reason why we have these phone calls and these discussions, and hopefully there'll be more questions from you asking me about issues going on in your life so we can give practical application. The more you do that, the more you will start to understand, wisdom with practical application. Sorry, education, knowledge with application is where you gain wisdom. So that's what I mean about behavior. You got to learn how to behave appropriately, because the Bible says, for much which is given, much is required. When you get this kind of knowledge and you gain wisdom, you have to know when to use it and when not to use it. So,
Thank you.
You bet. Any other questions?
Charles, just want to, not Charles, you sure don't look like Charles. Robert, what you were describing in terms of greed is in the Bible, but it's okay. So the Lord is coming back, and he's coming back for a church without spot, wrinkle, or blemish. And what you described in terms of greed was not being attached to a spot, because there are 3 spots. There's the spot of Cain, the spot of the Korach brothers, which was greed, which was jealousy, and then the spot of Balaam, which was greed. He had gifts, but he wanted to use them for his benefit in terms of greed. I'm just making a statement there.
Thank you.
But, okay, so a practical, so a blemish would be like not walking upright, walking lame, walking hunchback instead of walking upright. That would be a description of a blemish. However, what I just wanted to ask in terms of practical was, when we do the docs, because I'm just about completed, but I did them on different dates, do they all have to reflect the same date of when they began or when you completed them?
You're talking about the declaration status of the 13 exhibits, or you're asking if you sign them in front of a witness or 2 witnesses or 1 notary, do they have to have the same date? Is that your question?
Well, there's, so I'm not sure, because it says down at the bottom, not the one where you're signing it, but the one, it's like a date up above. Do I have to write the same dates for all of them? Do they have to be in terms of completion?
I would say they do not, but as a practical matter, most of the time they are.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll have to go back and edit those. Okay.
You're not going to be putting any dates on anything until everything is complete.
And Charles is saying that you wouldn't typically date that until you have your final draft printed, after all of the editing has been completed, and then you print it on bond paper, and then you get all of them together and you go down in front of your witnesses or notary and sign them all the same time and the same date.
Okay. All right.
That's typically what we do.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Charles.
Yes, go ahead, Debbie.
Okay, am I unmuted? Yes. Okay. The letter of delegation, is that referenced at all in any of the DOS documents? Because I don't remember seeing.
No, it's not. It's just a practical matter. I learned that, by the way, from an old dear friend who has passed. His name was Erwin Schiff, and he's an American hero who died in prison, who wrote some incredible books exposing the fraud of the Internal Revenue Service. His son, Peter, who's an attorney, has taken over the baton to continue his freedom fighting. But Erwin was an old friend of mine that I knew through seminars that I went to offshore back in the 1990s. not the 1890s, but the 1990s. And I learned that terminology from him and his books, The Letter of Delegation of Authority. And essentially, when you become the boss of your little world known as the trust that holds your all capital letter name, which is part of your paperwork, you become the boss, you become the top position. And anyone who is offering you anything from a law statute or an offer of obligation, you see, the conventional wisdom is they're offering it to you, the living, breathing being, but rather they're not. They're offering it to your trust. And because you're the boss of the trust, you're demanding to see their letter of delegation of authority, which authorizes them to attach or attack or claim against your trust. Now, it's no different. I'm going to give you two examples. One would be just a normal example, and the other one will be an extreme example. It's no different than, let's say you owned General Motors. Let's say you were the owner or the chief executive officer of General Motors, and some clown off the street comes in who claims to be a federal officer and says, you need to give me this and you need to give me that from your corporation. Now, you as the CEO of that corporation, what are you going to say? You know?
I was authority.
Yeah. I mean, would you not question that party's authority to receive the information?
Yeah.
What if you were Queen Elizabeth II? Would you go to Queen Elizabeth II and demand that she give you something that is privately owned by her? No, she's going to say, well, show me your authority, and when you can't, I'm going to have your head chopped off. Okay? So it's no different. Your little kingdom is the trust known as your all capital letter name. Get your paperwork done and you'll have it. And then when someone attacks your all capital letter name, even if it's an upper lowercase styling, it's still not you, the living being. They're attacking your trust, and you have the right, because you are the top position as the sole beneficiary, to demand to see their letter of delegation of authority, which grants them the rights and the privileges of your trust. And when you demand that, they don't have it, because you are the only one who can issue such a letter. So if you want to be the king or the queen of your little kingdom, you need to get your paperwork done. Any other questions?
Thank you.
You did yourself again. I want to say to you guys, I really appreciate this particular call, and I apologize for not having the facilitators have knocked out our internet. But this is serious times, and it's how appropriate to come in and bring up the pandemic and the COVID and the daggone chips. It's real, and they're talking about it regularly on the television, and people are totally oblivious to it. So when is it going to be done? There's no proof of anything of it working. So I don't know about you. I like to determine my own destiny. So I thank you for being partners and clients of ours, but I'm challenging you to start really getting this thing done so you can put yourself in a position of strength. Right now, you're still subject, and you're going to remain subject until you get it completed and placed on the record. And then being able to defend it is understanding what it is you got. So
yeah, and I agree with Charles on that. But I do want to add a caveat to that. The paperwork, in my opinion, is very important, but it's who you are and how you behave which determines whether you're private or not. So with or without the paperwork, your behavior determines who you are. I like the paperwork to be done and filed so I have paperwork to refer to, because when, not if, but when you're challenged on something, you'll have your paperwork right there to refer to. It's easier to have it written and refer to it than attempt to go to your memory. Even someone who has more experience, let's say like myself, I would still rather have the paperwork that I can refer to if I am under distress from threat, force, coercion, and intimidation tactics by a federal agency or by a courtroom or something of that nature, because I have human nature just like everybody else has human nature. And sometimes when you're under intimidation, your behavior might be a little different, just from your, your basic needs, and your thought process will be adjusted under threat, force, coercion, and intimidation. And so you're better off having the paperwork to refer to. Is it a requirement? I would say no. Your behavior is what determines it ultimately. But having said that, you're better off having the paperwork finished, filed, and complete, and have copies with you so that if you are under intimidation tactics, you can be like a parrot now. You can just say, which part of my declaration do you want me to read again? And you stand on your paperwork, and even though they may attempt to intimidate you, you'll win every time because you're not going to contract with them by poor behavior, by poor choices. So that's my little caveat to what Charles said. I agree with him wholeheartedly. Get the paperwork done. Do you have any other questions? If not, I'm going to ask Charles to tell me what else he wants me to talk about before we conclude this call.
Hello, this is Eliza Dixon.
Hi, Eliza.
How are you?
Good.
I'm really, this has really gotten under my skin a little bit, but I wonder about family members. I think you answered part of it though, and I think about my family now. I've filed my papers. I'm not sure if I'm completed, but I know that I've filed most of it. And I think about my family members, they people need to really know about this, and I'm really concerned about them now. Makes me more concerned that I'm learning what I've learned. And, I really want to know, well, a family, your family members, the ones that are really young, what do you do?
Well, I would approach that. First of all, your comments really show your heart. Your intent and your purpose of your life is to do that which is right or righteous in the eyes of the Lord. And I would approach this in the same way that I would approach being a witness for the kingdom of God. Proverbs around chapter 15 or 16 talks about some people are just not ready for wisdom. Some people require to sit in prison for 20 years before they're willing to make a change. Some people have to do it their way for an extended period of time and have a number of train wrecks in their life before they're willing to admit that yes, they can be taught something, and no, they don't know everything, and yes, maybe my life does need to have some things change in it. And for those people, all you can do is just continue to lead by example and demonstrate your life as an exhibit, like Jesus did in the 3.5 years of his ministry. He not only told us what to do, but he lived his life demonstrating how to behave and how to respond to the controversy that was presented to him. And so you continue to live as a private citizen, and you continue to grow in your education and share your heart. Now, when it comes to salvation, you cannot argue a person into the kingdom of God. The Bible says you need to share the truth in love, and it has to be unconditional love. And so the best way to do that, Eliza, is to lead by example. And when you're sharing your experiences, you share how your life has changed because of this education. You see, when you're sharing Jesus Christ with people, you can't argue that point to get them into the kingdom. But one thing that they cannot disagree with is how your life has been altered or changed since you have had a relationship with Jesus. They can't argue with that. So you continue to be kind and loving and share your personal experience, your witness to them when it comes to, I mean, you haven't had a lot of experience so far, but how have you felt knowing that your paperwork is in order now? How has that changed you from going from fear to confidence in dealing with those natural challenges we all face in life? And when you share your experiences with them and you stay stable and on that path of sharing how your life has been transformed, eventually your family members will see the light. Some will take longer than others. But this is not for everybody. There are a lot of people who need 20 or 30 or 50 or 70 years of train wrecks before they're willing to set aside their pride and say, you know something, I really can be taught something else. I'm going to get over myself and start learning something new and different. And that's right out of the Bible. I'm pretty sure that was in Proverbs, I think Proverbs 15 or 16. But in any event, that's how you do it, Eliza. You just lead by example and share how your life has been altered from this education, and pray for the people, because you're not going to change everybody, but the first step is to do it yourself and then share how your life has been altered, and then just pray for people, and the changes will come. I mean, look, I'm getting to be an old man. It took me a while before I got over myself. I still struggle with that, by the way. But I'm 67. I'm going to be 68 this year, and I'm still open to learning. And we have to be able to do that before, if you think you can't be taught something, you're not a real person that we should be spending time together to discuss this, because a know-it-all is just not ready. They need a few more bumps and bruises.
Thank you, but Mr. Chassner, I am older than you. And this is the most greatest thing I've ever heard. And I'm so thankful that my lovely daughter that I chose for me, Anna, has passed, because she brought it to me. And I'm just so, so happy about it that I'm hearing something like this. And I know that there are other people that would love to hear about this. I mean, it's just overwhelming, I tell you. And I really thank you all so much.
We're glad you're with us and studying with us together.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, too.
Robert?
Yes. Go ahead, Charles.
One of the things I wanted to say is that, yes, God, we all have, once you begin to get a snippet of a tidbit of this information, it's extremely enlightening. And quite frankly, as Robert said, it takes a lot of time. And people have invested a lot of time and energies in studying to get to this point. And there are opportunistic people out there in this world who will say, "Oh, I want exactly. Oh, give me that," but they can't defend it, and they won't put the time in that you're putting in. And we're admonishing you. I mean, well, Robert didn't admonish you, but I'm admonishing you to say this time is not your friend. We don't know what the heck is going to happen soon. If you don't have your information on the record, frankly, you're subject. And if you can't defend it, you don't know how to defend it because you've not studied to show yourself approved. You're gonna be contracting. You're gonna be writing. You're gonna be directing you to another line. And I challenge you, people. I mean, yeah, I like to save everyone in my family too, but I know everyone's not gonna listen. And some people don't appreciate things when you give it to them. Isn't that true?
It is.
Yes or no? So giving it away is not something there's value on what you're affording to do in this process. Now let's keep in mind honor versus dishonor. Now your family, you should be able to take care of it. If they're in your household and you're there and they're listening, they're sitting behind you. Right, my son's sitting right next to me now. The thing is, he's exposing himself to it. I'm teaching him it because that's my son. So, but again, nothing stops them from being in a room while you're learning something. It's like going to church together. So again, you have to get to that point in your life. And I don't think Robert would say anything. I wouldn't say anything. If that person's sitting there listening with you and that you're studying, both of you study, because iron sharpens iron. You got to understand what's happening. But just putting some paperwork for someone that doesn't know what's going on, it's only going to get them in trouble. Yeah. So it's going to get them in trouble because they're not going to know how to behave. They're not going to know how to act. They're going to think one thing and not know what would Jesus do. And quite frankly, it's going to cause them a problem. So I would challenge you to continue to learn and continue to give your testimony, share it with people. The difference. And he asked you a question: how do you feel differently now based on what you've experienced, what we submitted to the so-called office of obligation you were given, and how do you feel now versus what you were feeling when they were talking about initially when they were coming after you? Is there a big difference in your life now? That's you, Miss Dixon. That's a question.
Oh, I feel much better now that I can defend myself. There are a couple of things that just happened to me, and it's one is the example that what I'm fighting right now is going through right now with my house and all, and it makes me feel better that I can defend myself with that. So, like you said,
your paperwork is defending it. Now they can't respond to your paperwork because we're Maximum's equities come into reality. The truth, they function from fraud and fiction, and because you called them out on it, they really can't respond, and they're going to go acquiesce since they're not going to respond. We have a full process. That administrative process is not one page and you're done. No, it's a you put your own court case together. And that puts you in a position of strength. As long as you can continue to learn and apply what it is that we're teaching and put these things in place, document it, you're protected. So, and again, everybody wants to get rich quick. Everybody wants instant coffee. The big difference between instant coffee and ground coffee. So I challenge you. Guys, you're on the right track. You're blessed to have God has directed us, and we're part of the community now. We can grow our community. It may take a little time, but we have to first remember honor versus dishonor. Let's be honorable and do what we need to do, and guess what? We'll grow together. Fair enough?
Fair enough. And I really appreciate all of you, Charles. I really do. Chassner, I appreciate you.
Thank you, dear.
Just getting to know you. And I have Deborah that's working real close to me. And it's really a blessing. It's truly a blessing.
Well, it's symbiotic. We're very blessed to have each and every one of you, and to have you part of this group that we're using, that we're training with. So it is symbiotic. It goes both ways.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Charles. Is there anything else you would like me to cover on this call today?
You know what? I think, Robert, you've done an excellent job. I think when you do come back, you need to tie together again. And I guess I'm always going to ask the same thing, because I always have a philosophy to begin with the end in mind, and that's actually putting your trust at a point where you're utilizing that trust, be it through a special deposit or anything of that nature, where you're actually attacking a particular offer of obligation, and making the difference between that notice of claim and how that really works. That's going to be, it's not a 1, 2, 3 answer. But I think that's what really is going to help a lot of the people that's on this call really realize the value behind the full-fledged process.
Yeah. I'd be glad to cover any of that whenever it is you need, and as often as you need it. That's trust information. When you comprehend how a trust works, that's when you will begin to gain a tremendous amount of power. So these are important points. I agree.
Well, for now, we're good. I think we've done an excellent job. I appreciate everything you covered. I think it was a tremendous tool. I'm sure that even though if you're the host, I'm sure that I have access to a recording. If not, I'll communicate with you and let you know, and I'll make sure that my team has access to it, because I think it's a great reference. Yeah,
it'll come up on my computer, and it'll upload. I'll save the file and send it to you. Then you can do it what you wish with it. Okay.
Very good.
All right. Well, then for that case, I think what we ought to do is go ahead and terminate the call, because once I end it, being the host, it's going to disconnect everybody, I believe.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Ladies, get your stuff in as soon as possible, and let's get moving on. We got more things to deal with, a lot more paperwork to deal with. So let's please, this week, make it a priority to get to those things so we can move on to the, what's that? Oh my God, the 5 horsemen. We got to get to that next part. Okay, so have a blessed week. We'll talk to you later.
All right, blessings to everybody. I'm going to end the call.